Hey, everybody. Welcome back to DEMOPOD, the Demolition podcast with Axe and Smash. I am your host, Ryan Marr. This is episode 4. And I don't know if this sign means anything to anybody. I know it means
Four horsemen. You see Arn doing that all the time right now. 4 horsemen.
Yeah, and actually, we'll talk after we wrap up the business end of it. But I just got contacted by Arn Anderson's podcast host, Paul Bromwell, and we might be seeing Smash over on the Arn Show very soon, and we might be seeing Arn over here on the DemoPod soon. The possibilities are endless, but today we are here to talk about somebody that I know is very special to the both of you. A man who is become mythological lore in a lot of ways when it comes to pop culture and mainstream attention. The 8th wonder of the world, Andre the Giant, who has been deceased now. Oh gosh, I believe 32 years, 33 years. He's been gone so long, but
it's been that long already?
Yeah, January of 1993 is when he passed, so it would be 32 years. And this is one of the most celebrated professional wrestlers of all time. And there's all these debates about the Mount Rushmore of wrestling, and I don't think you can have a Mount Rushmore of wrestling without this man's face being the center of it. The first attraction in pro wrestling that just drew people in just so that they can look at him. And what do we got right here? Look at that in the box.
Can you believe that one?
Wow.
You never saw that, did you, Bill?
No, that's neat.
Yeah, Andre the Giant.
Yeah, I had his Hasbro figure, but I played with it. I didn't keep it nice and collected. I love that Barry Smash has the Demolition office now. This is great. He could just roll in and out and be like, oh, what else do we have? It's like a little pawn shop.
I got a lot of stuff I'm going to put up. I got a ways to go yet, but I'm going to have some fun with it.
No, that's really cool. But I figured that there are certain people that we have to just talk about and devote an entire episode to. The next one we're going to do after this is going to be Mr. Fuji, which is going to be a lot of fun. But Andre the Giant, when I think Demolition, is one of the first names that comes to mind. And Bill, I understand that he was one of your best friends, if not your best friend in the wrestling business.
I have to agree. I mean, you had a lot of acquaintances, probably other than Barry. He was probably my best friend. And I had met him years and years ago, and I still think about him. It set me back there a little bit when you said he had passed over 30 years ago. But I remember the first time I met him was in Greenwood, South Carolina.
Okay.
And of course, I knew of him, but hadn't met him, hadn't wrestled him. And they're opening a new building. And the place was jam-packed, sold out, no more tickets. Not because of any of us, but because of Andre was there. And I had the good fortune of being his opponent that night. Well, you hear the story about Andre and how big he is and this and that, but you really don't know until you're standing beside him or underneath him, really. He came through I was in the ring already, and I'll tell you, it was a funny story. Crockett's were running the territory at that time, and George Scott was the booker. And we were talking about the match, and they said, make sure you go at least 15 minutes. Andre doesn't like to go that long, and we need to stretch it out because it's sold out there, and he's the one that brought him in. I said, 15 minutes, that's nothing, because I had been going hour, 90 minutes, 45 minutes every night with Mulligan and Igor and all that. So 15 minutes was actually a night off.
Yeah.
So I get into the ring, and I didn't know that in Andre's contract, he had, at that particular time, the office that he was working for had to supply 4 quarts of cognac that he drank as he was playing cribbage. And Barry tells some good cribbage stories with you about him later. But and he would be drinking and playing cards, and then the match would start, he'd come out. And he comes through the doorway, and my God, he ducks under the doorway, and everybody around him is under his armpit there. That's how tall he is. So he gets into the apron, steps up on the apron, and does that big giant step, which later on remind me of a story to relate to you that Barry and I know about John Stead, about stepping over the top rope.
I can't wait for that one.
And then he gets in, and we have the match, and there was a spot in there where he's going to give me a slam. Well, he picks me up to give me the slam, but he staggered a little bit, and I put my hand on his shoulder and pushed myself up, and he looks up and he goes, "Thank you, boss." And he slammed me, and from that day on, I was his good friend. I mean, he wanted to work with me just because I helped him. And every time he came in, it was great for me because I was getting those full houses. And so the match went and went and went. It only went about 7 or 8 minutes. And he said, "Let's go home, boss." So, of course, what am I going to do? Tell the Giant no? So we go to the finish. I go out of the ring, go back to the dressing room, and Jimmy Crockett comes running up to me. "What did I tell you? What did I tell you? You're supposed to go 15 minutes minimum." I said, "Jimmy, wait a minute. If you go over in that other dressing room, there's a really big guy, and I mean a really big guy. And when he wants to go home, he's going home." Of course, Jimmy never went over there.
Of course he didn't. But I want to make sure I'm understanding this because I vaguely remember you telling me this story when we did a virtual signing together a couple months back. You hadn't met him at all prior to that, right? You didn't even talk over the match. You just went to the ring and called it out there.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. There was no, there's not like it seems to be in situations today. No. It happened in ring. We were in different dressing rooms. One guy was on one side of the building, and the other group of guys were on the other side of the building. And sometimes you had 3 dressing rooms, and Barry can remember that because they just separated the guys.
I don't want to get too far ahead, though. I have to ask you because, I mean, you already at that time, were an established pro, but this is Andre the Giant, the biggest attraction at the time in the business. You haven't even gotten to shake this man's hand, and now you're going down the aisle to step into the ring with him. Is there a part of you that's kind of shaking in your boots? I mean, I know you're a pro at this time, but this is huge. I'm not even talking about the physical aspect. This is the biggest star in the industry at the time.
Oh, he was. And I think if you look back, and you mentioned a good point about Mount Rushmore, if there's a Mount Rushmore that Andre's not on it, then it's a fake mountain. It's just not a real mountain. Yeah, but I was never apprehensive. Maybe it's a competitive part of us.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to do good. But when he came through that doorway, then he stepped up and went over top. I'm thinking to myself, "Holy shit, what did I get myself?" Because you don't know. I mean, if he doesn't take a liking to you, and Barry and I have both seen him, if he likes you, you're golden. He'll do anything because he trusts you and he likes you and he wants to match. But if he doesn't like you, ask Jake, ask Iron Sheik. We can't now, but
yeah,
ask a certain number of guys. He beat the living crap out of them. Savage.
I've heard all of those stories, and that's what's so fascinating about, it adds to the lore, right? Because, you're talking about the bottles of cognac, the stories of the drinking are legendary, but, most people think that takes place after the match. The fact that he had the cognac in the dressing room, how much of it was, let's let this guy do what he wants because he's the top star or because he's a giant, or is it a combination of both?
I think it's a little of both. I mean, who else was out drawing him? Wherever Andre went, wherever he went, whether it's anywhere in the States or Canada or Europe, especially Japan, he drew money. I mean, people who didn't like wrestling wanted to see the Giant.
They were in awe of him.
It's like the circus coming to town. It only comes to town years ago 1 or 2 times a year, and you better make it. So...
Yeah. Now, Barry, did you have any interactions or run-ins with Andre prior to you going to the WWF to be a member of Demolition?
I met him way back. But by the time I got up to the WWF, he didn't remember who I was or anything. But what helped me so much is being with Bill, because Bill was friends with him. So I already had kind of that, rub off, bond there. So when I met him, if I was with Bill, then that was kind of okay, And after a while knowing him and talking to him, I used to play a lot of cribbage with him and everything. And then that's really when I got to know him, because then, we started talking about his farm, and, I'm talking about my wife and my son, and, it's no longer talking about wrestling or any of this stuff. We were talking about good things about each other. And I think, with Andre, he was kind of a very lonely guy, except for his friends.
Mm-hmm.
And the wrestling locker room, that was his friends.
Yeah.
And, we all didn't look at him like, oh man, this is this huge giant. He was just a good guy, a friend. And that's what he liked. And I think, that's kind of why I think he started really liking me a lot too, because I was actually trying to be a friend of his. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, here's a man who, at a very young age, I believe he made his debut as a wrestler in Paris before coming over to the United States, but his entire family remained over in France. In fact, when he passed away, he had flown home to pay his respects for his father's funeral, which is a horribly ironic, tragic twist there. But like you said, you're on the road constantly. That's your crew. Those are your boys. What I'm curious is that where the foundations of such a strong friendship develops, Bill? Because you had that night with him in South Carolina, but your guys, did you start traveling together after that? How did that bond become so close, even years before you got to WWF?
Well, I had been back and forth to Japan. I had a standing contract with Japan for a minimum of 12 weeks, up to 16 weeks a year.
Mm-hmm.
And Andre had a similar contract where he'd go. So we were probably, I was there, I want to say at least 40 tours between 3 weeks to 8 weeks. And out of those 40 tours, I was probably either with Andre as singles or tags or a combination half of that time. So our relationship and friendship grew as we were there. And, working with him, working against him, a lot of people tried to take advantage of him, but he was smart enough to realize, because every time we would be in Japan in particular, the promoters or the local people would invite him out. So he wanted to have somebody with him that he felt comfortable with. So he would invite a few guys. Well, everybody wanted to go.
Of course.
Was free drinks and free meals and this and that. But he was selective in who he wanted to go. And I remember one thing that really stuck out with him. And I had mentioned to him, he says, come on, we go there, we go where. And I told him, no, I'm not going. And he looked at me strangely and he says, why? I said, because you never let me buy anything. You always pay.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anybody had ever, maybe they had, but that never occurred to him before.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not going out with you unless it's on me. And he said, okay. And that endeared him and me to him even more.
Until you got the bar tab that night, right?
Yeah. But I mean, he had covered so much,
Of course, yeah,
out of his friendship that I didn't feel comfortable. And then Barry and I went out a couple times, and we would do the same thing for him. But most guys went because they knew Andre; he was going to pay for it. Well, we didn't. We weren't mooches.
Of course not. But to that point, there was two things that I wanted to touch on based on what you had just said, because part of the mythological lore that we hear about Andre the Giant is how much difficulty he had in traveling because of a man of his size when it had to do with air travel, car rental, hotels. And in Japan, which is traditionally architecture and things are not designed for the American-sized person, from what I've heard over the years, Japan was especially grueling on Andre.
Yes, it was, but the office, New Japan, had made a couple accommodations for him on the bus. They had a big Greyhound style bus with TVs and all that stuff. But they took out two seats and
Oh, okay.
brought in a double wide seat for him in the back with lots of leg room. But this is kind of creepy because yesterday I'm flying from Calgary back to Atlanta. And of course, that's a 4-hour flight. And Barry, I'm sure, went through the same thing. I had to go to the restroom.
Oof.
So you go into the restroom in that flight. You know what popped up in my mind?
How did Andre?
Andre the Giant. Because we used to go on long flights, but in particular, going from New York or Atlanta or LA to Tokyo. It's bad enough on us,
Yeah.
but for him to try to get into that restroom area. And I'm telling you the truth, he popped into my head yesterday. And it's weird that we're talking about this. So, Andre, I'm thinking of you, buddy.
No, that's things that you just don't really consider as a fan watching it. So, my Andre the Giant fandom, if you could call it that, I began watching in 1987, 88, around that area. So, he was already what many people have said about his in-ring career on the downside. But it's kind of remarkable if you think about it that he drew 93,000 people at WrestleMania 3 when he was on the downside of his career, depending on who you ask. And I've heard the stories over the years that it was actually Vince Sr. who said to him, listen, you have to stop doing the drop kicks. You have to stop showing off that athletic prowess. You are a giant. You need to perform like one. And I'm curious to know if either of you were privy to this information. It made business sense, but did that ever bother Andre before he got to the end where he was limited? Was he kind of like, well, no, I'd rather do this stuff and I want to show off my athletic ability, or did he just fully embrace that giant role?
Well, I think that he was a phenomenal athlete. When I first started working with Andre when I was here in Georgia, I'd work matches with him. And believe it or not, one of his finishes was he'd go up on the top rope
Wow.
and do a big splash on top of you from the top rope. And it was like a 747 coming down. His arm looked like his arms and his feet, when spread out, touched all four pillars, all four turnbuckles. And boom, would come down. Of course, the ring would just go up and down.
Yeah.
He never felt it. And another one is he used to take a drop kick and stagger backwards a couple steps and go backwards over the top rope and land on the floor. I mean, he was a phenomenal athlete. Good soccer player, from what I understand. And they even tried to contemplate putting him on the football field with the Washington Redskins years ago. So he probably stepped back because he was listening to Vince and wanted to follow, regulations and things. But he was a good athlete.
You had mentioned going out with him and how you guys wanted to treat him because he was always the good time Charlie of the group, taking care of everybody. Back in those days, especially with kayfabe alive and whatnot, or not even just the sake of kayfabe, because there were times where you guys were heels. Where do you get to hang out with Andre the Giant without it becoming a spectacle? I mean, if you go out with some of the other guys on the roster, if it's you and the Killer Bees, you might be able to sneak into a back room somewhere. I would imagine anywhere you go with Andre, you guys are the show.
Well, he's the one that got me started going to the Marriott's. Right, Barry? We always stay at the Marriott's. One of our philosophies was we would travel good. We always had good rental cars, big, spacious rental cars. We ate good, always had good meals, slept good, stayed at the good hotels, and we worked out. That because our product was us.
Yes.
So we took care of the product, because if the product is busted and broken down or spoiled, you're not going to make any money. You're not going to make any sales. So Andre was the one that got me hooked on going to the Marriott's. And then when I found out you could get points for every dollar you stayed, it just made sense. So
I want to go into, you had mentioned it earlier, Axe, and this is where Smash is eventually going to start coming into here over the next couple of years. But tell me a little bit about the feud with John Studd. I remember, like I said, started watching wrestling 1987, 88. I believe WrestleMania 3 had already occurred. So I had to rent videos from my local Palmer Video at the time in North Bergen, New Jersey. And I got to watch Andre the Giant's climb through as a babyface, the WrestleMania 1 body slam match, all those things. So as a young boy that really believed Andre the Giant and Big John Studd hated each other, really wasn't that far from what was going on behind the scenes. Am I right?
Oh, yeah. It didn't start out that way. I mean, John, when I was in the Charlotte territory, John was my partner, very good friend of mine. Our families were good friends. John, for some reason, thought that he was going to become the Giant. And then he took over the stepping over the top rope, which was Andre's gimmick. And that would have been good if Andre's in Philadelphia and John's in Atlanta or another town. But for him to do that in the same town, Andre often, and Barry will verify this, told him, don't step over top rope. My gimmick. And I remember Vince even telling John not to do it. But he did it anyway. And we were in Omaha, Nebraska. And Andre was working against John.
I remember that.
We hadn't seen John for a number of months. I don't know what had transpired, whether he was sick or whatever. But anyway, he often thought that he was going to replace Andre.
Mm-hmm.
He even voiced that to Andre, which you don't go up and piss off a giant. So he goes in, and Andre told him before the match, do not step over top rope.
Oh.
John stepped over the top rope. Andre went in the ring, and Andre beat the living shit out of John. Beat the living shit out of him. John comes back down out of from the ring, comes down, grabs his gear, grabs his clothes, shoes, everything, bag, and takes off. And that's the last time that I believe Barry,
We never saw him.
the last time we ever saw John. Because he didn't listen. I mean, for God's sakes, there was a ton of money that he made before working with Andre. There was another 1.5 to 2 tons to be made after. Why would you not just follow directions?
If I may play devil's advocate on that, and again, I didn't know John Studd, and I certainly, unfortunately, did not know Andre the Giant, but from what I've read and from what I've seen over the years, I mean, there's been the HBO documentary, there's been so much coverage of Andre the Giant, especially over the last 10 years. Around this time where he was having that feud with John Studd was when he was still doing the tours to Japan, and I believe he had requested time off because he had been cast in The Princess Bride. So could it have been that there were people from the office, whether it was a rib or not, you know how the politics are and guys like to bust balls, were guys going to John Studd perhaps and saying, you know, once he's out of here, he's going Hollywood. You're going to be the guy. Could that have been?
I'm sure that would, there's always somebody in the background.
Well, and the guys are stirring it up in the back too.
There's that always happens. But even if you think that and you heard that and you got that in writing, why would you tell the real Giant that?
Yeah. Hey, and here's how good a guy Andre was too. When he was over there, he did the Princess Bride and everything. When he came back, he was tired. He was on the road a lot, and he had a Pizza Hut commercial he was supposed to do. And he came up to Bill and I and said, "Hey, how would you guys like to do a Pizza Hut commercial?" And
he was the one. That was because of him.
Yeah, we said, well, yeah. So he went to Vince and said, Vince, I want the Demolition to do the Pizza Hut commercial. So that was all set up. It was supposed to be Andre doing that, and that was us that went in and do that. He didn't have to do that. He could have said that to anybody.
I never knew that. And I've worked with you guys. I mean, this is episode 4 of the podcast. We did the virtual signings together, but I had no idea that he was the one that was responsible for that Pizza Hut commercial because he already had the mainstream appeal. He had done something for Honeycombs and whatnot. But I mean, you guys were a perfect fit for that. In fact, when I told my friends that I was hosting the Demolition podcast, they actually said, "Oh man, those guys were great." And one of the things that always comes up from several of my friends is the Pizza Hut commercial, because you didn't have to be a wrestling fan. You saw that commercial, you went, "Who the hell are those guys?" You know, it was just, I had no idea that was him that put that together. That's wild.
Yeah. Andre was a really, really good guy, and in the ring, both Bill and I are professional. We have our matches just like everybody else. And, one time I was in the ring and I made a comeback on him. I mean, it was boom, 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 and hitting him. And we get back in the dressing room and I sit down and all of a sudden Andre walks in and he says, "Barry," and I went, "Uh-oh, what did I do?" And he says, "I need to talk to you," So I jump up, I go over, "Yeah, what can I do?" He says, "Next time on the comeback, just lay it in a little bit more, make it a little bit more convincing." And I'm already, I work a little stiff,
Mm-hmm.
I said, "All right, I'm sorry, boss, I'll lay him in a little bit." So we have a match another night, next night or 2 nights later, and I make this comeback, boom, 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 and I hit him, pow, right in the chops. And I mean, I hit him, wham. And he starts staggering back. He goes, "Not that hard," and he's ribbing me, but I mean, how do you hurt him? But first thing I thought was, holy shit, he's going to get me back now, but I mean, he's just a really, really good guy and a sense of humor that just was, he was incredible. Didn't he just love to rib Bill?
Oh yeah, he'd pull ribs on people, but they weren't malicious. I mean, they were fun.
Well, one rib he pulled on me. He had me down, and he sat on me, and he's sitting there, and he probably had about 5 bottles of wine or whatever he did, and all of a sudden, he starts farting, and this fart went on for about 10 minutes. I mean, it didn't stop. It just kept coming. And he's right here on my chest, and I'm like this, just gagging, and he's just laughing his head off. And I thought I was going to die.
Ted DiBiase told me on a virtual signing that he pulled that on an elevator in Japan.
Yeah.
And they all...
Was he Bill?
Yeah, I was there. I was on that in Japan. There was about 15. It was at Tequila Plaza. There's about 15 Japanese people getting on the elevator, and he closes the door and he stands by the door and he faces the opening of the door. And I'm in the elevator beside him, and he lets one go. And those poor little Japanese guys, they didn't know where to go. And then he goes outside and he shuts the door. Yeah.
Farts are always funny, but giant farts are on a whole other level. That is awesome.
Especially when they smell like Beaujolais wine a little bit, that's really bad. Ooh.
Yeah.
One of the things that I loved about Young Rock on NBC was the way that they portrayed Andre, because again, they're showing a time frame that is prior to the WrestleMania era. And the reason that I say the WrestleMania era is because in a lot of ways, Andre became the first real mainstream star in wrestling, in my opinion. And I have a theory that I think you guys would agree with. If you look at that whole build up to WrestleMania 3, and we're going to go back a little bit because I'm skipping over quite a bit of stuff here with the machines and whatnot. But Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan, the way it was built worldwide, and especially to the United States, was that this was a first time ever situation. Andre the Giant never defeated, never been pinned, tapped out, whatever you call it, against the immortal Hulk Hogan, the biggest star, the babyface of the industry at the time. But if you lived in the Northeast, and I remember hearing about this from my uncles and other family members that were fans at the time, you already saw Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant at the Showdown at Shea in 1980. And Andre had already been slammed. And now here we are just 7 years later, and the entire Northeast, which is the WWE base, is now being told, "Oh, no, this has never happened before." But Andre is such a big star at this time, after coming off the Princess Bride and whatever, that it was basically almost kind of like what they do with these comic book movies now, where they just like snap their fingers and go, oh no, we're going in a different galaxy, a different dimension. Like Andre was that guy for WWE.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
and that is mind blowing, because nowadays you hear people going, oh, I don't like that Triple H is letting Netflix peel back the curtain and take him into the writer's room. Well, you know what? At least now people can see how things are done. If you were a fan in that period, you were like, wait a minute, what's going on? Why is Andre with Bobby Heenan? It was just a wild turn of events. And I have to ask you guys, did you notice a difference and a change in him? Because when he's portrayed in Young Rock as the fun-loving guy with the jug of wine and whatever, the stories seem to change a little bit as years go on. He really was in a lot of pain and he was struggling. Did that change his demeanor overall?
Well, like Barry mentioned, he always felt at home, and his home was the locker room.
Okay.
He was one of the boys. We were family members. Now, even in a family, you've got family members that you don't like, or you stay away from. You're cordial to them. But I don't think any of us realized until much later in my career, how much pain he must have been in, because he never told anybody. He was such a professional. And he had to be, because, when we do these signings and stuff, Barry and I were mentioning the other day, just sitting in the chairs that they had for us for 5 and 6 hours at a time, 2 days in a row, when you get up, you can hardly walk.
Yeah.
Well, everything was uncomfortable for Andre, whether it's an automobile, a bus, a chair, a plane. So a bed, everything was uncomfortable. So after a number of years doing that, he had to be in constant pain all the time. And maybe one of the reasons that he consumed so much alcohol was to numb the pain.
Yeah.
But he never told us. So I don't think he would tell anybody else.
And I think, it was like the last time we went to Japan, I sat with him and we played cribbage the whole time. Well, usually when you're making a trip like that, how many hours after your stop? You're looking at 14 hours, 12, whatever it is.
Right.
So you try to take a nap on the plane, so you kind of get in that schedule. Well, I'm playing cribbage with Andre for 12 hours, and he didn't want to sleep, but I know he wasn't going to let me sleep. But I think it's probably because he hurt so bad, he can't fit in those seats. He needed to stay awake and do something, So we ended up playing cribbage all the way there and all the way back. It's, he never ever said how bad he hurt or anything, but sometimes when he'd get up or when he'd walk, you could just tell he was in pain, but he sure wasn't going to tell anybody that.
Bill, did you know in advance that you were going to be a part of the whole machines gimmick? Because again, this is a little bit before my time of starting watching, but from what I understand there was the whole premise. He went off to Hollywood. I guess maybe the fan base believed that was it. Andre the Giant was retired, wasn't going to come back. And now they did the whole angle with the machines and he has to get reinstated. That all eventually wound up leading up to the heel turn with Bobby Heenan. How far in advance did you find out you guys were going to be doing that together?
Well, the Hollywood, the Princess Bride took place after.
Okay.
It started. I'll tell you what happened. We were going there again to Japan for a tournament.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Madison Square Garden Tag Team Tournament. They run it every fall. And we were going to be, I think we were going to be partners on that particular tour, Mass Superstar and Andre the Giant. So when we got there, we landed in Tokyo, and one of the office personnel who met us said, we have to go to the office. Inoki wants to speak with you guys. So we, instead of going to the Keo Plaza, we went downtown to the office. And what had transpired is that they had a team that they called the Strong Machines.
Mm-hmm.
And their manager was Wakamatsu, and they were very popular. But just before the tournament, they were going to be in the tag team tournament. Before the tournament started, they jumped to Old Japan, Baba's group. and we were working for Inoki New Japan. So Inoki explained, we had this team, they jumped, but their manager stayed. I have this idea. We want to make you the machines. We want to replace them with the giant machine. Everybody knew who Andre was. Everybody knew who Mass Superstar was because we had been there so often. So we're going to have the giant machine and the super machine with Wakamatsu every night, challenge the strong machines, embarrass the strong machines. Wakamatsu would tell them that they're weak, they're no good, they're afraid of us, and this and that. And consequently, after about 4 or 5 weeks of that, the other office did let him go after a period of time. But during this period of time, Vince had heard about it, so he sent over Mean Gene. And if you remember, Inoki was a member of Parliament in Japan.
Yes.
So we actually got to get inside on the Emperor's territory, on the grounds, and we did some interviews inside the walls of the Emperor's palace. So Mean Gene would interview us, and he'd give that, you look familiar and blah blah, but I'm not sure, and this and that. So we were supposed to come back. We did the gimmick there in Japan, and then we were supposed to come back to work for Vince. Well, Vince said, well, let's bring that gimmick over. So it was only supposed to be about a 4 to 6 week tour because Andre had just signed the Princess Bride contract. He was going to have about 4 to 6 weeks, and then he was going to go to England to tape. So in the interim, we were going to have a little fun with it. And we were, Bobby Heenan had expelled Andre and this and that. So we weren't allowed to come back. So he comes back and he said, I know who that is, and I know who the other guy is. But then we had the Hulk machine, and we had the Animal machine, and the Junkyard Dog machine, and the Piper machine. And it was fun. And even to today, people say, why did you guys do that? Because everybody knew who you were. I think you're supposed to know who we were.
And they actually have copied it many times since. I mean, they did it with Hulk Hogan as Mr. America a number of years ago, and I'm sure that there's many other examples that off the top of my head I can't think of. But going back to your point about how he didn't tell either of you gentlemen about his acromegaly and how it was affecting him, I should say. I don't know if he spoke to you privately about anything that was going on.
Never did.
Which is incredible. And it's almost, a kismet kind of serendipitous situation that his WWE run, at least in ring, did end the way that it did. Because if you look at that whole buildup after WrestleMania 3, of course, to this day, the main event against Hulk Hogan, where he wins the title and immediately sells it to Ted DiBiase, I believe that did like 11 million viewers. Like there has never been a pro wrestling televised show that has gained anything close to that since, and at this point never will. So he had all of these things going on in his career when he wasn't being the athlete that was taking the drop kicks over the top rope and jumping off the turnbuckle. So I think it's a true testament to when you hear all these veterans tell their wrestling students, sometimes less is more, because he was able to do all that while being quote unquote limited in the ring. But now we have to move on from that, because after WrestleMania 4, it seems like they're kind of using Andre in a position to get over some of the other talent. I mean, it's being billed and told to us that he's never lost, never tapped out. He gets defeated by Hulk Hogan. After that run is over with Hogan, he has a feud with Jake the Snake Roberts that was very memorable because he was deathly terrified of snakes, and that was the chink in his armor. He has a series of matches with Macho Man Randy Savage, which he loses for the world title. And then, of course, a memorable feud, if you want to call it that, with Ultimate Warrior, which leads to one of my favorite stories ever about how Warrior was being way too hard on the clothesline, and Andre kept warning him, slow down, take it easy, take it easy. And then finally, on one of the nights, Warrior comes charging full steam ahead, and Andre just puts his fist up like that and cracks Warrior in the head. The next night, Warrior comes, clothesline, light as a feather. Andre's tied in the ropes, turns to Heenan and goes, he's learning.
That sounds like him.
But all of that goes on, and you would never call Andre the Giant a jobber, but he starts losing to these guys, and then he gets put together with Haku, and you guys are the reigning WWE World Tag Team Champions. You're in your second reign until December 13th, 1989, and it wound up airing on a episode of WWF Superstars on December 30th, 1989. You guys lose your World Tag Team Championships to the Colossal Connection. Now, I know you guys didn't know what was going on with his physical appearance and how he was feeling. How was it presented to you that you were going to drop the tag titles to them? And did you know you were going to get them back at WrestleMania VI?
I don't really remember. Do you, Barry, off the top of my head?
No, like Bill was saying earlier, we never went to the office and talked to them and, brown nosed them or did whatever. So usually whatever they came to us with, we agreed because they were taking care of us. Mm-hmm. And they just came in and said, Andre and Haku are taking the titles tonight. And it was like, okay, great. Two great guys. If you're going to lose the belts, that's two guys you want to lose them to because they're believable and we had good matches with them. So that's kind of what I remembered.
Yeah, and you also know, like I said earlier, that if you have them or you lose them, you're going to get some return matches out of it. So, and we did have good matches. The chemistry was very good, and I knew that we were going to have a series of matches. I honestly don't remember if they ever mentioned we were going to win them back.
Well, one of the theories that's been floated around out there in the wrestling news and podcast universe is that the reason that it was put together, Andre and Haku, was because you guys were supposed to do more with the Brainbusters until Tully left and then Arn went back. And so they were kind of scrambling. But if that's the case, I don't know if it is or it isn't. The fact that you were able to be a part of that last run with somebody that both of you loved and revered so much, I really think you gave that career and that Giant situation an extra shot in the arm because you guys, wound up making him be that believable killer one more time. And what was it like to have those matches with him? What were some of the things that he would say coming through the curtain afterwards?
Well, we always had a comfortable feeling. Mm-hmm. We knew that he was going to do the best possible that he could do, and we also knew that he was slowing down a little bit. But like I said, he's a total pro. He was going to give you 100%, even if he didn't have 100% going. He was going to try.
What was nice is when we had a really good little run with the Brainbusters, and they were a perfect team to go against because now we were the baby faces and they were heels and they stayed on you and they were just very convincing. And when Andre put the chair in the ring, that was kind of the start of that whole angle to where we were going to end up wrestling those guys sometime throughout the deal. So it was kind of foreshadowing before all that, and that just set everything up to have the matches with them.
Yeah, and a lot of people have asked about WrestleMania VI specifically, and that's why I asked if you guys knew. I mean, you said that you kind of figured he was slowing down, but he didn't say anything because he didn't tag into that match at all. It was basically you guys against Haku, and I didn't know if that was by design to maybe hide some of his weaknesses at the time or some of his ailments, or if that was just maybe a way to keep him strong to do something down the line. I just didn't know if you guys had any insight on that.
Well, to be honest with you, when we were involved in the match, I honestly don't remember him not tagging it. Because we were immersed in the match.
Of course.
And it was brought to our attention later on by a lot of fans. I'm thinking, my God, he didn't. But I never thought of it at the time because Haku's a handful anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Haku was a wrestling machine that night. I watched it over, and the stuff that Haku went through that night with us, it was phenomenal. He was tired, he worked his ass off.
Yeah.
I found another interesting tidbit that until I was doing some research for this episode, I had no knowledge of, and I'm not sure if you guys were going to remember this, but so of course WrestleMania 6 happens. There's the big face turn at the end where Andre paintbrushes Heenan, rides off in the cart. We don't know what's coming next. And he also attacked Haku because Haku tried to go after him. But on April 10th, only a few days later, there was a house show in Honolulu, Hawaii, where you guys had a return match and successfully defended the tag team championships. And I was just kind of wondering if there was maybe some kind of traveling issue or whatever, because we just saw on WrestleMania, Andre was done with the Heenan family. He tacked Haku. He laid waste to Bobby Heenan. And I read that he teamed up with Haku one more time against you guys. Is there any memory that you may have as to why that happened?
Well, that probably, like everything else, was probably booked before that. And they had maybe changed the scenario at the end of the match in WrestleMania. Yeah.
And that was that was on the way to Japan. We stopped at Honolulu first, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah.
And then from there, then we wrestled Andre and Baba over at the Tokyo Dome. Then right after that.
I'm so glad you said that, because that was my my next thing. Andre's last official WWE match is credited as April of 1990, and it was in Japan with Giant Baba. So
we put those guys over big time too, you know.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it. It's amazing to me that when people compare WWE's WrestleMania to the Super Bowl, right? In a lot of ways, it's true. But unlike the Super Bowl, you don't get to go to Disney World afterwards. No, you get to go to Hawaii, but you're not going to be laying on the beach and rested. Get your ass out there, guys.
Yeah.
Like, that's what really, I don't think people understand, even diehard fans. And I think in a future episode, we're going to definitely break down some cool stuff about, you know, the traveling schedule. I mean, because now all these years later, you could talk about it and laugh about it. And I think that it also breeds to what you're doing now, right? I mean, because here I am talking to Dan, our producer, going, oh, let's leave them alone. They just got back from Vegas. No, they're off to Canada. They're off here. The life you guys lived, you didn't get any downtime. I mean, you're in Canada for WrestleMania. Then you're in Honolulu, Hawaii, and then off to Japan, all in under 10 days. That's wild.
Oh, yeah. That was typical. And as you're relaying, when we're talking about traveling, just remind me to give you the itinerary we've had on some of these recent trips. Oh, my God.
You know, and the one thing we didn't talk about Andre either was when you and I both went out there for that Royal Rumble, when Andre came to the ring next.
Yes.
First thing he did is he put us over, you know, went down, tied himself in the ropes, did all that stuff. I mean, he just, he liked Bill, which in turn liked me, which was thank you. You know what I mean? He was fun to work with.
It's funny because we said we were going to try to keep this around 45 minutes. We're at 48, and I had a feeling we were going to run a little long, but we're going to wrap this up in a minute. I just wanted to ask if either of you ever had the privilege of attending his ranch, getting to see where he lived, because I remember as a kid seeing an expose in a magazine. It could have been like People or Variety or one of those types of magazines where they showed his ranch in Ellerbe, North Carolina. And that is something over the last couple years with social media. There's a lot more pictures of it. There's a lot more private pictures of Andre on his property. Did either one of you ever get to visit that house? Because from what I understand, that was another place that he really, really enjoyed.
Yeah, my wife and I and my two daughters went up there, and we spent a day and had a barbecue. And
wow,
he had a bunch of four-wheelers. I think he had 4 or 6 four-wheelers at the time. And my youngest daughter, Heather, got on one of them, and she took off. And then a couple of the other guests were there, and they were gone like 12 or 15 minutes out of sight, you know. Wow. And I could see Andre over there because he really liked her, and he was pacing back and forth. And I said, "What's wrong?" He says, "Where's Heather? Where's Heather at? I don't want him to get hurt." And then they came back in a couple minutes, and he got a big smile on his face, like, "Oh, they're okay." But he was a good guy. He welcomed a lot of people to his, you know, his ranch and his home. And I often thought, and like Barry mentioned, I often thought that he knew that he wasn't going to live for a long time.
Yeah.
and he wanted to soak in time at his ranch. He wanted to soak in time with people he liked and not spend time with things that he didn't care for.
Mm.
Yeah, and 2 different times he invited me out there, and I couldn't go because I had things going on, and I felt so bad because, when somebody like that asks you to go, you really want to go.
Mm-hmm.
But, he understood, I had family stuff I had to do. And it was like, he asked me at the last minute,
Yeah.
and, I lived in Charlotte at the time, so I'm only an hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes away from his place too. But yeah, I never got to go out there.
Well, and also too, I can imagine that with the life that you guys lived, where your personal time with family is so fleeting, that it is difficult to make plans with anybody, no matter how close you are with them. That, if they're your friend in the locker room, friend on the road, when you're home, you want to be home. So I can totally understand why that would be the case. A lot of times you're probably making those plans last minute because you never know where you're going to be. But it blows my mind to just be sitting here with two guys that not only worked with them, that had such close personal relationships. I mean, Bill, I can only imagine what it was like for your daughters as kids. Like, oh yeah, Andre the Giant's my godfather. Yeah, right. Get out of here.
And the nice thing, and we haven't had, we haven't had the opportunity. They have a museum in Ellerby now.
I've heard that.
Dedicated to Andre. And Barry and I have both been asked to attend. They have an annual event. And I told him, I said, it's on our bucket list, but every time that we get called, we've already had a previous engagements. But that's one of the things I want to do. Just go up there and look through it and pay some homage to him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd have my wife on the road, and first thing when Andre would see my wife, it'd come up and give her a big hug and everything. And, kids, my son, he just loved my kid. He was just, he was family.
Yeah.
Is there anything that's out there about him that you feel you need to correct? I mean, there's been so many stories over the years, and Bill, I kind of feel like you indirectly did that already, because when they talk about the drinking, the partying, he wasn't doing it to be Ric Flair, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but that wasn't what it was. I mean, this was what he needed to do to get himself comfortable after.
I think so. And then you have to take in consideration, he was a giant.
Yeah.
So, we were telling a story the other day, somebody had asked me, and I physically sat in a restaurant with him in Montreal, and he had 110 beers at lunch. And the newspaper people from New Japan were there, and they documented it. And people said, well, that's BS. It's not BS. But you realize his hand was so big, and you put an 8 to 12 ounce can of beer in there, it covers it.
Yeah.
It's just like a sip and a half. So, we're having dinner and we're chatting back and forth, and they're questioning him and they're doing interviews and stuff. It's not hard. I probably had 4 or 5 beers myself.
Yeah.
And for him to take a swig and set it down and get another one, and everybody says, oh, that never happened. It did happen. And I'm not the only person that witnessed that. He had done that several times.
Of course. Well, I'm the type of
he
person who
wasn't
enjoys
trying to outdrink himself each time. So
yeah, I mean, I enjoy my beers from time to time, and if you think about it, if you want to take the edge off, if once a month on a Sunday, I did it for WrestleMania, you sit down with a 6-pack and whatever. But what as a 6-pack for me would have to be a case for someone. I mean,
hey Bill, before we finish, you got to tell Ryan about the story with Mulligan and Andre in the hotel room.
Oh my God!
Please.
It was in Raleigh, North Carolina, at the Hilton. All the guys stayed there.
Now you know how big Mulligan is too.
Absolutely, not a tiny man.
And Mulligan was the big machines, for people who didn't realize that, but don't tell anybody.
Kayfabe.
But anyway, we're one of the few times everybody got together. I think Murdoch was there, and Mulligan, and Flair was in and out, and myself and Andre, and we're sitting in I think it was on Andre's room or Mulligan's room. And Mulligan's looking at Andre very seriously. And Andre's drinking, and he's setting the beer down. And Mulligan's drinking, and he's setting the beer down. And Mulligan's staring at him. So Andre puts the beer up, and he's drinking it, and sets it down. And Mulligan got up, and he hit Andre as hard as he possibly could. Boom!
No justification, just for the...
No justification. And later on, he says, I just wanted to see if I could knock him out.
Wow.
But get this now. Andre sets the beer, gets hit in the face, sets the beer down and said, why'd you do that, boss? And he shoves Mulligan.
Oh, man.
Well, Jack's standing up, and there's big sliding doors, and we're about 7 or 8 stories up. There's a small, maybe a 3-foot landing up there, and the door's open, and Mulligan's going over the railing, and Andre reaches out and grabs him and pulls him back in.
Wow.
Sits him down. And everybody's looking, what the hell would you do that for? He said, I just wanted to see if I could knock him out. Well, no, you couldn't.
And I'm sure word got around fast. And if anybody had any ideas of trying something like that again, they learned quick.
Well, you know what? They did it. Him and Murdoch, they're drinking up in Virginia Beach. I wasn't there at the time, but Murdoch and Mulligan, they both jump Andre. They're walking down the beach, and they think they're going to beat him up, and they tuck him down, and he just flew him off like 2 flies.
Yeah.
There again, why in the hell would you do that?
You know, I hearing these stories is mind blowing, because you think about how he might have been gawked at, or must have been gawked at, anywhere he went because of his size. Forget about the fame aspect. Even if you didn't know who Andre the Giant was, you see a man of that size, you're going to look, right? It's going to take you by surprise. We talk about the lack of comfortable accommodations, whether it be air travel, hotel, cars, you name it. But what you just brought up, those are 2 professionals, his band of brothers. They want to test him. I can only imagine the amount of drunk idiots that wanted to just test him for the sake of it. And I've actually heard stories, ones that I'm not comfortable yet telling on the podcast, but I know some people in New York City that have said, you know, that there were times where they saw him very gingerly just clear out a bar because some moron and his buddies wanted to try and test him. So he had to be somebody that was on edge everywhere he went.
Well, you know the old adage, the liquid courage makes bold people out of a lot.
Yeah. Wow. It's just been so great to take this trip down memory lane. There are so many different talents that we could profile and talk about. I'm so glad to be on this journey with these guys. I want to remind everybody, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or your favorite podcast platform, please, please, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also follow Demolition Pod on Instagram. You can send all your questions and DMs there. Next week, we're going to be talking all about Mr. Fuji, and I already have a lot of questions lined up from the fans. That's probably going to be a long episode, and I'm not going to let Axe and Smash off the hook, because I'm sure that they were involved in some of those ribs, whether they want to admit to it or not. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But please keep spreading the word. We're going to keep doing this as long as you guys keep showing interest. Subscribe to YouTube, share the links everywhere. Spotify, YouTube, put it everywhere on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram. Follow Demolition Pod. These guys are keeping busy. They got a lot of stuff in the works. This one's been all about Andre the Giant. Guys, I don't know if we can follow up Andre getting attacked by a drunk Blackjack Mulligan. That might be the one to end it on.
Thank you, Ryan. It was great show. Great show.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you.
We have so much fun, and we got many more to come. Follow Demolition Pod on Instagram. That's Axe. That's Smash. I'm Ryan Marr. Good night, guys.
Good night.